Okay, now I want to flip the script just a little bit. Centering around Luke 15, we've talked about the younger son and the older son. And for most of us, this is where the story stops. We've heard it told this way and that way, and we've heard it told where we felt like the younger son, and sometimes when the story and the preacher's preaching it, we feel like the older son. Sometimes we feel like maybe we're the father as we've got a wayward child that's out there running amok. But always we focus around those three entities: father, younger son, older son. But in this story, there is an untold son. There is the son not mentioned. There is the third son. Let me tell you about the third son. The third son is the son that the father had to have to reconcile the other two. The younger son left the father because of greed, because of self, because of desires and wants and entitlements. The older son distanced himself from the father because of self, because of pride in his works, and wanting the prestige and the glory that belonged to the father. The third son gave up his place beside the father. The third son gave up his rightful place beside the father to go and save the younger son, to go and save the older son. The third son wanted the younger son and the older son to share in what was his. He was not concerned about getting his. I mean, how many times we hear that today? I gotta get's mine. I gotta get's mine. Well, I deserve it. I got it coming to me. We hear those things all the time. But the third son in this story was not concerned. He wanted to take what was his by way of the father and give it to the younger son and the older son. The third son was entitled. Being a son, he was entitled. But he chose to give up his self nature in order to serve the Father. He gave up his will to serve the Father. He said, not my will, but your will be done. He gave up his self. Do you get the difference there? The younger son, driven by self. The older son, driven by self. The third son in the story, that's often overlooked, was selfless. The third son that I'm talking about, of course, is Jesus. If we look at this parable as the Father being the Father, Father God, creator of all things, and we look at the younger son as being those that are outside of the flock, and the older son as being those that are inside of the flock, the unchurched and the churched, the sinner and the saint. Then the third son is Jesus. He came and gave up his place beside the Father to reconcile the younger son and the older son. He came and gave up what was rightfully his willingly so that all could share. He wanted everyone to have a part of it. He was truly entitled, but gave it up to serve the Father. His selfless act was done to justify us. He who was righteous bore our selfish nature on the cross because he was selfless. He did this because he wanted to bring both brothers home to the Father. Because he knew it was the Father's will to have both brothers reconciled and at home. And he wanted to do the Father's will. Now the Bible tells us that when we're saved, that we are joint heirs with Christ, which means through his selfless action, we can be reconciled into the family. Do you understand that? He says we are joint heirs with Christ. And given the fact that we are not selfless and sinless like Jesus, we are either one of the other two brothers, which makes Jesus the third brother, the best big brother anyone could ever have.